A special treat this morning. Bill Scott is going to be with us to share with some of his travels and experiences and observations. And we're looking forward to a visual treat. Come on, Bill. Thank you.
Let's see here. Got a limited amount of space to work with here and a lot of paper. The visual treat aspect of this is questionable. The first two cathedrals I'm going to present, I had a camera with me. It was a very neat thing, a Fuji or whatever the heck it was called at the time, and had a huge telephoto lens, lots of bells and whistles on it. Took a bunch of pictures. I landed in Madrid, went down to Cordoba, ended up in Seville, and in Seville, the car got broken into and the pictures all went away. So I had to go online to get the pictures that I got. So let's get rolling here. Again, I have to apologize. I don't do public speaking on a regular basis, so I learn as I go. And I put this whole thing together, and I gave the talk sort of extemporaneously to a fellow as we drove back from Augusta. I belong to Dare, and Dare goes and fixes up houses in different places, and Augusta is where we were this time. So we were driving back from Augusta, and I said, well, I'll entertain this guy for driving by giving him the talk that I'm going to give in class. And we started as we left Augusta, and I ended it as we were about to get on Georgia 400. That's a 3-hour drive. So I tried it again last night. I got it down to an hour and a half. We're obviously not going to make it through everything I've got to talk about here today. But let's get moving. Well, good morning. I'm going to talk about cathedrals. We'll talk generally about what they are and specifically about a few that piqued my interest over time. I've been to a whole bunch of cathedrals like most of you have, but only a few of them really stick out in my mind. This talk can be considered an outlier in our usual Sunday school presentations. It's not about the religion being practiced in these churches, nor is it about God and our relation to him. Rather, it concerns itself about some of the buildings that house the ceremonies and worshipers of him. I wasn't asked to create this talk. Rather, I volunteered to do it out of an interest in architecture and history, and mostly because I like the sound of my own voice. The few churches I will talk about have been chosen because A, I visited them, and B, some particular oddity or characteristic caught my attention. Years later, I still recall each one of these places vividly. So we all know what a cathedral is, right? They're those great big ornate churches that tourists go to see. And the biggest and the best of them is St. Peter's in Rome, right? Wrong. Turns out that a cathedral is a very specific thing. Size is not its definer. Rather, a cathedral is the home church or office of the bishop of a diocese. It's the seat of his power. And by the way, cathedrals actually have a throne in them that is the bishop's seat. The word cathedral is derived from the Greek word cathedra. Is that coming up on the screen? Oh. I'm sorry, we should discuss this. I'm not ready to show those pictures yet. So you show me.
Okay. It's there.
And I want to
Hold it close to the camera. Cathedral.
Can you put me on the screen as the measure?
You're behind the pictures.
Turn around and look.
That's the bishop's.
All right. So this is what cathedral's all about. Comes from the Greek word cathedra. It means the seat of the bishop. So how did St. Peter's get voted off this island? I mean, the Pope is a bishop of Rome, right? And we've all seen him up on the balcony. So what gives? How come St. Peter's isn't a cathedral? Well, it turns out that the seat of the Pope as Bishop of Rome is St. John Lateran, a structure about 2.5 miles away in Rome. St. Peter's is in Vatican City, which is actually sort of a little church state. St. Peter's is where the Pope leads the entire Catholic Church from, the seat of the religion. So what does that make St. Peter's, besides it being a really big, cool, impressive place? Well, it turns out St. Peter's is a basilica, which means a really big, cool, impressive place. Or a church building that, due to its antiquity, dignity, historical importance, or architectural importance and beauty, has been given the title basilica. Furthermore, only the Pope can bestow the title. So being a basilica is a pretty big deal, which of course St. Peter's is. Well, it sounds like splitting hairs, right? Going right down a definitive rabbit hole, perhaps, or something only a committee or bureaucracy could cook up. Well, the Catholic Church happens to be the oldest continual governing body on the planet, and it therefore is the biggest bureaucracy that's out there. So enough of this introduction. Let's get on with it. 45 years ago, and Billy here is making his first trip to Europe, and I'm all uptight. I'm really excited about this. I get off the plane in Madrid, I jump in my rental car, and I head south to Toledo, the former capital of Spain. It's a medieval walled city looking pretty much the same today as it did 1,000 years ago, if you just ignore the McDonald's a short distance inside the city gates. I'm here as a tourist, and I've prepared for the trip by reading James Michener's IBERIA. Spain is on the Iberian Peninsula, and Michener is a huge fan of Spain, having spent lots of time there and done tons of research, and he produced this 800-page tome about Spain. So it's sort of a travelogue mixed in with a lot of personal observations. So when I first got this book 40 years ago in preparation for the trip, I got it maybe a few days before I was actually going to leave. I ran over to the library. I said, give me the book IBERIA. They did. I breezed through the parts of the area that I knew I was going to be visiting, and he lit a fire under me. So 40 years later, I want to get a talk, and I think, well, maybe I better get the book back. So I go to the library, and I say, well, give me James Michener's IBERIA. And the young girl looks at me vaguely, and I'll look it up. Yeah. We don't have it. Really? You don't have Michener's? Give me Hawaii. Oh, we don't have any of Michener's books. You're kidding me. Michener's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's done 40 books. This is very typical of what he writes. If any of you have read Hawaii, it's probably twice as big as this. It's an incredible book. The man's an incredible scholar. Well, turns out that population has grown like crazy since Michener wrote his, more than doubled, as a matter of fact. And all those people are writing books. And it's pushing all the older authors off the picture. And yeah, it's impossible. It's hard to believe, isn't it? But libraries like the Cherokee County Library are relatively new and somewhat small, and there's a limit to what they can have. Anyway, I had to send away to get the book, and now I own my own personal copy of IBERIA. So Michener introduces me to Toledo and to this cathedral in particular, and to the primary feature of it that we're going to talk about. This cathedral is called Metropolitana de Santa Maria de la Ascensión. instead of the Toledo Cathedral. So it was started in 2026, pretty much the day after the Moors were chased out of Spain, and finished.
2023.
Oh, did I stop?
The problem with that,
It's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, we're listening.
1226.
oh,
1226. And it was finished in 1493, 267 years later.
Is this the right one?
Okay, there we go. So let's hear what Michener has to say about this and what caught my attention. The heart of Toledo is the Gothic cathedral, begun in 1227 and finished more than 250 years later. It is so beautiful that one could never exhaust its variety, so evocative of the religious and civil history of Spain that can never be fully understood. It is a masterpiece of concept and execution. This coming from a man that I respect. I mean, this is Michener saying this. He's blown away by this place. I care little for the exterior, he says. What I've been able to see of it, for the facade is so uneven, it looks as if the Visigoths had planned it. The Visigoths are the people that are in Spain before the Islamists come, and they introduced Christianity to the country. The various doors leading into the cathedral have been admired by some, but they are poor things compared to what we shall see in the north. But even if the exterior were a masterpiece, it wouldn't matter because you really can't see it. Houses and shops are jammed against it, and only from across the river can one see the part that soars above the surrounding roofs and gain an idea of what the building must have been before it was so sadly encroached upon. And I can verify this because picture a medieval city. The roads are they just wander, and they're very, very narrow. And in fact, I'm driving my car and thinking, well, I'll just go right over the hotel. And as I went to the hotel, the roads kept on getting narrower, narrower until finally I couldn't negotiate them anymore. I couldn't drive the car to the hotel, at least through the path I was taking. Anyway, so now it's time to find the cathedral, and I'm out walking about in the city. And I've got my paper map with me. Remember, it's 40 years ago. The internet is just in its bare infancy at this point. And smartphones are still 25, 30 years away. So I'm walking along, looking at the map, and I am totally confused. On one side of me is just this massive wall, blank wall. On the other side of me are a lot of different walls, and I can't see above anything. There's no grand vista to see. Then I'm looking at the map and I'm very confused, and I see an elderly woman behind me, a local woman from her garb. And I look at the map and I look at the woman, I point to the map, I say, cathedral, cathedral. And she looks at me a little quizzically, and then as if to rest, she puts her hand against the wall, and I say, no, 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 I need the cathedral. And she says, and I said, come on, lady, let's help me out here. And she looks at me like as if to say, you stupid Americans. Turns out I am standing next to the cathedral, but because of the outside of it, it's nothing to see, and I don't recognize it. So I walk up the way a little bit, turn the corner, and this is what I see. It's a very small open space, a plaza, that doesn't give you the sense of grandeur that you get from most cathedrals. This thing is wedged in, and that's about the best kind of a shot a photographer can get of it. So it's time to go in. Can you go to the next picture? All right. So this is a floor plan of this cathedral. And you would think from my previous description, it being hard to find and everything, it's not such a big place. The yellow area is called the nave. And it, all by itself, is bigger than a football field. This is not a small building. It's not the biggest cathedral in the world, but it's huge. It's a huge space. The other two buildings were not, or two parts of it we're not even going to bother discussing. But can you go back to the floor plan? It's interesting. The floor plan is interesting in that the altar is situated, and I'm going to walk up to the screen and point, right here. So this whole area of the building, while it has different things going on in it, it's just a wide open space, a huge open space. And when I'm there, it's very, very dark. So the altar is right about here. This is the nave. This area back here is called the ambulatory. And that it does nothing. It's just dead space. But this fact that it's a curved kind of a thing is going to loom interesting in my approach to what I'm about to see. So there's
Question,
lots
Bill.
going,
Are there pews or are they just open floor?
open floor.
That's what
Open. When cathedrals were first
Yeah.
built, pews weren't part of the build. Pews come along later. And some cathedrals you go in today are loaded with pews, and others just are in their original state. In any event, we're going to talk here. You know, everybody expects me to tell you exactly what a cathedral is, but there is no exact definition of a cathedral. They are built to the style of the day and the whims of the people who fund them and the architects that create them. But the Catholic Church, being a huge bureaucracy, gives names to everything that's out there. Guys sit around in committee meetings and they say, well, what's this part of the cathedral? Let's call it the ambulatory. Not all cathedrals have all these parts. Gothic cathedrals, which this is one of, are built to sort of a set of standards that is popular over about 1,000 years. But they are not all alike. They all have or don't have some of the parts involved. Here are some of the parts that you're going to see. Oh, there we go. In a cathedral, the nave, the transept, the apse, et cetera, et cetera. And then down below the reja and the reredos. Well, you've all heard of those, right? So we could get involved in where each one of these things is, but since it's not a rule that a cathedral must have this thing, why bother? Just sort of curiosities. All right. So why are we here in this cathedral? How come Michener thinks this is such a big deal? So let's go to the next pic. Okay. No, back there. Okay. This is sort of an angle shot of the altar. Yeah, where's the altar? Isn't that bizarre? It's encaged by a cage. And the cage is called a reja. It becomes popular around the, let me see here, around the 16th century. The 16th century for Spain is a huge thing going on. In 1492, the 15th century, Columbus gets his marching orders from Queen Isabella here in this cathedral. And off to America he goes, he comes back and says, holy mackerel, man, you ought to see this place. So immediately, lots of other adventurers take off to the New World and start returning to Spain with loot. Holy mackerel, there's gold in them Nar Hills. Gold and jewels and things like that. Spain becomes one of the most incredibly wealthy countries on the face of the earth for its time. One thing about cathedrals is they take that wealth and they focus it on the cathedral. A cathedral is like a moonshot here in America. We decided to go to the moon and we suddenly turned all the strength of our economy on the problem. And in a few years, by God, we were standing on the moon. Well, they didn't have that kind of technology back then, so they built cathedrals. And they decorated them with gold and jewels, especially the tabernacle and the things around the altar. So the average guy in Spain lives in poverty. It's that simple. You're either in poverty or you're one of the ruling class. And so it became necessary at some point to protect the wealth that was there in the cathedral. It also became an interesting way to separate the hotshots from the common man. The priests got to be inside the reja. The common man, well, he was outside. So this, ma'am?
Be sure to look at the people. And see.
Oh, the scale of the thing is incredible. The scale of the thing is absolutely incredible. Everything about this cathedral is immense, as you'll see in a minute. This reja is one of the most incredible ones ever created, as are most aspects of this cathedral. So now it's time to, let's see, turn the page again. All right, this is the altar. There you go, way down there. That's the tabernacle. That's where all the action is. That's why we're here in the cathedral. And the tabernacle is where the body and blood of Christ is kept according to the Catholic Church. Look behind it. Back, please, stay on the same picture. The height of the ceiling in this place is 147 feet. This massive wall is called a reredos, and it is beyond incredible. Just look at it. It's wild. It's crazy. It is leafed in gold. Reading from Michener again, the gold leaf reredos, which soars above the tabernacle, is so intricate and ornate as to be more like a fantasy than a reality. Immensely high, its upper figures seem to be trying to escape through the roof of the cathedral. It's composed of tier upon tier of religious tableaux carved in high relief on larchwood, then covered with gold leaf. One panel, for example, might contain as many as 5 life-size figures set off from nearby panels by yards of intricate filigree work. But the construction is so gigantic that one has no sense of clutter, but rather of a heavenly pageant, which one is permitted to glimpse through a golden frieze. There are 14 such scenes in this thing, and any one of them is large enough for an average church. So the scale here is crazy. What I've failed to convey, Michener says, is the effect of this intricate flowering of late Gothic art. It is so resplendent and dazzling that in a lesser building it would be overpowering, if not preposterous. But in the far reaches of this cathedral, it seems necessary to fill the space. All right, well, so what's the big deal? The reredos actually causes a problem. And this whole thing evolves over hundreds of years. The reredos is so placed that the tabernacle, which is the whole reason for being here, is in shadow. And in the early days of the 18th century, it was decided that a shaft of light should be brought through the rear wall of the cathedral and then through the back of the reredos so as to illuminate the tabernacle. They're going to solve this problem by punching holes in the wall of the cathedral to admit light, and then punch another hole or holes in this gold leaf structure just so that light can come through, because we don't even have electricity yet. This is the 18th or 17th century. So doing this might also solve another problem. just as Queen Isabel had objected to people staring at the articulated statue of the Conde de Luna during Mass, 2 centuries later, devout Catholics were objecting to the fact that others, less devout, were wandering about the ambulatory during service. In other words, the service is going on behind that screen. People are really sort of disembodied from the whole thing. The cathedral is the biggest building in town. It's where everybody gets together. And so they're hanging out in back of the altar, doing business, talking, socializing. So you can imagine what a noisy place it was. And they're hoping that doing this, lighting the altar up better, would stop this from going on. Getting to me. So what we're about to see is the solution to this problem. And it is, hold on. So the two gaping holes, this is from Michener again, resulted, and it was the steps taken to mask them that constituted the marvel of the transparente. So if I was given the task of doing what they wanted, poking a couple of holes in the cathedral, letting in some light, if I was given the task today, I'd make short work of it. I'd send a couple of guys down to Home Depot. I'd say, go buy me a half a dozen double hung windows. You know, we'd punch a hole up top, we'd stick the windows in, and we'd rip a hole in the rados, and we'd be done with it. On time, under budget, let's move on. That's not what they do at this time. Doing anything in the cathedral, I mean, this is God's space. You cannot do enough for God's space. And they create the transparente, which becomes one of the wonders of the world for the time that it's in. The fellow who's given the work to do is a guy called Narciso Torme, and he's a sculptor. Well, lucky enough, Narciso has 4 sons. 2 of them are architects. One's a sculptor and one's a painter. And Narciso says, hey, I got enough work going on here to keep the guys busy for a few years. And he does. And he comes up with an absolutely incredible thing. Now, I know it's there because I'm reading from Michener's book. Michener's book only shows me these 2 pictures. Do they look like anything worth looking at? Absolutely not. You can't really tell what I'm about to see from these pictures. All I know is there's something there worth seeing. If Michener likes it, I probably would too. This one shows an angel holding a cable, and that'll be of interest in just a second. Anyway, recall again the fact that the wall is curved as you go to the ambulatory. So you really can, as you walk along toward it, I know there's something back there. I'm not sure exactly what. So I head to the ambulatory. This is something you've got to know that it's there in order to see it, because you can't see it from anywhere else in the cathedral. You got to be on top of it. And as I walk along, it suddenly becomes apparent to me, holy mackerel, look at what's ahead. Now you can see to the right, you can just see the walls as they existed before this transparente was put there. They're very plain, very typical, and they're very dark when I was there. Turns out that the pictures are all professional photographers, and they've lit the place up like crazy to take the pictures. But it also turns out that in around 2010, they had a big effort to clean the cathedral up. You know, hundreds and hundreds of years of lit candles and whatever else they do have turned the cathedral quite dark. So in 2010, 30 years or so after I've been there, they've cleaned it. And now all of a sudden the place is, alive with light. So I'm walking along and I come along and I see, holy mackerel, look at this thing. And one of the first things I see closer to my eye level is a lantern suspended. and I look up and I see the lantern and it's attached to a cable, and the cable goes up and up and up until, holy by golly, look at this. There's this incredible collection of sculpture up on the ceiling. And the whole idea is to let in the light. They've blown a 30-foot hole in the side of the building, and they've created this amazing, absolutely amazing work of art, but we're not done. So Tomei put his whole family to work. When the holes were completed, the sculptor and the painter, aided by teams of assistants, began producing a whole company of saints, angels, prophets, and cardinals. Some were painted flat on the walls of the openings, but in wonderful perspective, so that from the great distance at which they were seen down on the floor, they appeared to be sculptures. Most were sculpted in marble or bronze, and some of these were polychromed. Intricate abstract designs suggesting flowing robes and foliage were created to hang over the corners so the architectural details of the piercing could be masked. And splendid groups of figures, so intricate that the eye could hardly unravel them, were put together so that the opening leading to the tabernacle could be hidden and yet permit light to pass through unimpeded. As a jigsaw puzzle, the Transparente of Toledo is without peer, and the pieces are full-sized human beings. Now, to fit the puzzle together, it's apparent that we are speaking about two rather large holes separated by a considerable distance. Well, Narciso and his four sons solved this problem by posting along the edges of the outside cut a stunning array of biblical figures who seem to pour into the cathedral from the heavens. They twist and tumble, they clutch at one another, and they raise their hands in prayer, fall and slide, gesticulate and grimace, forming a veritable cascade of heavenly figures from which we slowly pick out the significant fact at the outer edge of the opening sits Jesus himself on a bank of clouds surrounded by the angels of paradise. The upper half, now can you go to the next slide? All right, so there's that. And you can see this is the window is here. It's all painting on the side, and as it comes down, it starts to look more like sculpture until finally you get to the lid, and there's the sculpted part. Remember the angel I talked about in the picture here? He was holding a cable. That cable was holding the lamp that I saw. Very dramatic, very dramatic. I apologize that the pictures simply cannot get the point across. It is so big, and the space in which you get to see it is so small that the cameraman can't get back far enough to take an adequate picture. And there were pictures available that maybe could do the job, but they all had a price. And I like you people, but $100 now. So we got the pictures that we could live with. And go to the next picture, please. All right. So there is but you'll notice the ceiling still is decorated. So they're going to take that decoration and continue it around until you see the next slide. Until you get here. This is where the back of the reredos. It's where the light falls. And they wanted to sort of, the idea was, you don't just want a hole there. We want to cover it up a little bit. And this is how they covered it up. An absolutely stunning marble collection of sculpture. Absolutely unbelievable. In fact, I think one of the first things I'm thinking of as I'm standing there is this a joke? Is this some guy with a real clever sense of humor has decided that they're going to put this absolute incredible set of sculptures in the back of the altar? This is nowhere land in the cathedral.
Can't even see it.
And yet here we have this incredible transparente. The upper half, he says, of the transparente is the lesser of the two parts and the more restrained, for the whole back of the reredos has been converted to a tower of marble which reaches from floor to ceiling. When it was finished, a problem arose. How do you join the two halves? And here Tomei and his sons showed ingenuity. They provided a mural which crosses the top of the cathedral and ties the two halves together. It is a daring and successful device in which painted and sculptured forms unite to make one vast procession. So there you have the cathedral in Toledo. Not any one that you suspected I was going to talk about. It's not St. Peter's. So many other cathedrals in the world. Very few of you, I'm sure, have visited this one. And if you did, you might have just missed the Transparente altogether. So let's see if I've made enough mess of my notes. We're going to move on to the next one. So I get in my car. I've done several days in Toledo. I get in my car and it's time to move on. The next place I'm going to see is Cordoba. Why am I going to see Cordoba? I was drawn to Cordoba because of several things. It was the home of a guy named Seneca. And he was a philosopher that lived around the time of Christ in Cordoba. And very interesting guy, sort of a cynic, but with a very good sense of humor. Also, Cordoba, as it turns out, is the center of Islamic culture for the time that the Moors are in Spain. The Moorish culture is different from ours, but it is incredibly interesting in its art and its philosophy. And Cordoba is the seat of it at the time. And another reason to visit Cordoba is because it's on the way between Toledo and Seville. And I'm ultimately going to go to Seville so I can have my car broken into. So Seneca, who's this guy Seneca? And what is there to see? You go into the Jewish quarter of Seville, and there's a column about this tall and a bust, and that's what's left of Seneca today. But Seneca, as I said, made a huge contribution to philosophy years ago, and here's why I like him. Life, if you know how to use it, live long enough. Thank you, Mr. Seneca. Okay, so in Cordoba is a mosque. And this mosque is, for its time, the largest mosque in the world. It's built up over time by several different caliphs, and each one adds on to it, and they create this mosque. And that's all I know about it, is that it's a mosque. And I've never been in a mosque before. But when you think about what is a mosque is simply a place to get in out of the rain so Muslims can say their prayers. They have to show up 3 times. Well, they have to go to prayer 3 times a day. They do it wherever they're at, but the mosque is a formal place for them to all get together to do it. And so it's just a protected area, just as I said, so they can get out of the rain and do their praying. They would then, the men would come in, the women would come in a whole different area. They would unroll their prayer cloths, get down on their knees, and say their prayers. So what's a mosque got to have in it? Well, nothing. And that's exactly what it has in it. It has all kinds of arches. In fact, if you go to the next slide, well, maybe the next one after that. No. Somewhere in there, I've got a floor plan of the mosque. There you go. Okay. The whole mosque is illustrated there. Originally, There are over 1,000 columns in this mosque. And it's just Muslims don't allow for any depictions of living things, humans, animals. Everything is done with geometries. So let's read again from Michener. He says, I entered the mosque by an unprepossessing door and decided to look with an unprejudiced eye at the so-called miracle. And as I stood in the darkness and began slowly to adjust to the shadows, I found myself in an architectural fairy tale, surrounded by so many pillars and arches that I could not believe they were real. I suppose from where I stood, I was seeing something like 400 separate marble columns, each handsomely polished with its own capital of Corinthian foliage. The arches that rose to these columns formed a maze which attracted the eye this way and that. They are striped with alternate bands of yellow and red, etc. So that's exactly my impression. I walk up to the mosque. I approach it from an area where the outside of it is bland. The door itself is decorated. You go inside and suddenly you're in this. And you're walking along. It's featureless except for this. So you're walking, thinking surely something must happen. I mean, this is a big deal building for the Muslims. Keep walking, and can you change the picture? Here's those arches from a different perspective. Change the picture again. Look in the back to that floor plan again. Look in the middle. What the heck is going on there? It turns out the mosque was built over a Visigoth church, a Christian Visigoth church. So years ago, the Muslims take over Spain. Muslims enter Spain around the year 711. And this is an incredible because the Quran, the start of Islam, happens around 638 AD. And all of a sudden, we thought Christianity spread fast. The Islam religion spread even faster. By 711, less than 100 years later, they are able to raise a force of 16,000 soldiers, and they cross from Africa into Spain at Gibraltar. And of course, nobody calls up the Spanish to tell them these guys are on the way. So they get there. The Spaniards are completely unprepared. Nobody's got any weapons. And so it's just like the Germans taking over Europe. And within less than 100 years, within 7 years, they took over pretty much all of Spain, effectively all of Spain. And then the Christians start the Crusades and start to take over Spain, but it's a long process. It takes over 100 years, 200 years. So the Christians come along, they've got control of Cordoba again, and they say, well, these nasty guys built this thing over a Christian church. We'll show them. The thing in the middle is this church. They build a church in the middle of the mosque.
Martha and I have attended a service in that church.
I'm sorry?
Martha and I have attended a Christian service
In that, in fact, there was one going on when I was there. But I'm walking along thinking, well, what the heck's there to see here? When all of a sudden, I'm in a church. What? How did this happen? So the church it's fancy, it's cool, but by the standards of other cathedrals, and it is in fact a cathedral, it is the seat of the Bishop of Cordoba. So it belongs in this talk. The next slide will give you a much better. You can't see the cathedral from the street. The walls of the mosque are like 20, 30 feet tall. And again, the streets are narrow. There's no perspective for you to see that this church is in the middle of the thing. So for me, it's a crazy surprise. But interesting thing about this is scholars, if you would, consider this to be one building. It is now one building. And as such, it is, according to Wikipedia, the third largest church in the world.
Okay.
It's no longer a mosque.
No, it's no longer a mosque.
What's this area? The tall part of the structure there.
That's the original, the Islamic tower, the prayer tower, where they call you to prayer. Yeah, it's now a bell tower.
Okay.
Yeah, Christians converted it to a bell tower. All right. So there you have it. I have 5 churches to present. And we've run out of time. Quickly move over to the next one, Bruce. It's the next presentation. I'll see what I can do about hitting some of these others. The whole next second half.
You have the age of the mosque?
Oh, yeah. The mosque was started. I thought I did. No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Like, look,
700,
Oh, no, it takes,
76.
720, but you said
yeah.
711.
7-Eleven was when they cross over, but then it takes them some years to continue their conquest, and it takes years to build, a whole governmental infrastructure. They're there for almost 1,000 years in Spain. So the Spain is a mishmash of different cultures and different actual peoples. The Visigoths and the people before them come down from Northern Europe, and they are blonde, blue-eyed Europeans. And so their gene pool is part of the structure, and they're there for a bit of time. The Spaniards come, they're all from the Middle East or Africa, dark black hair, dark eyes. And so what is the typical Spaniard today? Well, you can see both of those characteristics in a Spaniard. You'll be walking along the streets of Seville and you'll see beautiful blonde haired, blue-eyed women. Okay, so here's the next thing I was going to talk about. And this shows you why a cathedral isn't built to any particular set of rules. This is the Crystal Cathedral. So back in 98, I think it was, let me see. A mechanical engineer accompanied by an electrical engineer, they're sent to California to help a vendor dig his way out of a hole. And it was supposed to be a 3 or 4 week assignment. It ends up being 4 months. But we were stationed in Laguna Beach. Tough assignment. But on Sunday, what would you do on Sunday? So I decided, why shouldn't I go if I was in Europe, I'd go to a cathedral, right? I'd go visit a cathedral. Where's one around here? And it occurs to me that, well, by golly, we've got one right here in Orange County, and it's called the Crystal Cathedral. I'm going to go see this thing. The Crystal Cathedral, in 1955, a young guy from Iowa climbs onto the roof of a concession stand in a drive-in theater, and he starts preaching. He's in Garden City, California. The Santa Ana Freeway has just been completed. Disneyland is built just down the street. And Robert Schuller stands on top of this concession stand and starts preaching. So Schuller is definitely, just like Malone Dodson here, Schuller is the right man, the right place, the right time. Television is in most people's homes in 1955. Things are really rolling along. Things are changing big in America. And Schuller has a message to deliver. The man is on fire, absolutely on fire, and everything he touches turns to gold. He starts the hour of power television kind of thing. He's like one of the first televangelists. And so he builds a couple of different churches here, but each one he builds is insufficient to hold people that are coming to see him. I mean, he's got a 38-acre piece of land. It's a drive-in theater. And the spaces, the angled parking spaces for the drive-in theater is still there. It was perfect when he first started. He had nothing, but he had everybody parking in their cars with speakers attached, and he could talk to them, and they could all hear him, and they wouldn't even have to get out of their cars. So just for that point alone, he became an intriguing thing. Let's go see this. This is crazy. We can sit in our car and go to church. So at some point, he decides he's got to have a big enough theater to handle this thing, and he hires Philip Johnson, at the time the most renowned architect in the country. And Johnson takes Schuller's vision and his own vision, and he says, let's build something that's just utterly outrageous. And he builds this crystal cathedral. It's 10,600 panes of glass. It's originally seated 3,000, and thousands more would be outside in their cars listening to the thing. So I go, and silly enough, I go in my jacket and tie, and back in '98, still wore those things. And I sit down inside the place, and I think, oh, wow, this is something else. But my first observation is, this has got to be some incredible amount of heat gain. Holy mackerel. They must have a really huge HVAC system here. You know, preachers talking up there, and I'm thinking, where's the HVAC system? Where's the heating and air conditioning system? There's no ductwork. And I'm looking around for it, it's not there. I can't wait for the service to be over so I can go find out where the HVAC system is. Sermon ends, I run out, start asking questions. They say, well, there is no HVAC system. There's just not one here. But so Johnson has designed something, the climate there is relatively mild. And Johnson's designed a system of louvers and vents that hopefully will keep the place cool. And it sort of worked, not perfect. And that's why I've made the idea that I was impressed by the fact there was no HVAC system in it. But, why is this thing here? Is it a cathedral? Schuller was a Protestant. He was one of the first unaligned Protestants. They're not attached to a mainline church, but he's definitely not a Catholic. So how does this thing become a cathedral? Well, it turns out that in 2010-ish, he goes bankrupt. His entire congregation is changing over time. When it first started, the area this thing is in is all white folks raising families. Over time, the population of Orange County changes and it becomes Latino and Asian, and they're all Catholic. So his people are actually dying off while the area has turned Catholic. And the guy spends money like crazy. And that's what made him famous to begin with. He puts on grand productions, especially around the holidays. Some of these pageants would cost like $5 or $6 million to stage. And over time, he simply runs out of money. The income from the church has dropped, but he hasn't stopped making productions. So who buys the church? The Catholic Church. They buy it out of receivership. They take one look at the structure and they say, this is really an iconic, really cool, and we couldn't duplicate this for the amount, if we were to tear it down, we couldn't rebuild a cathedral for any kind of reasonable price. So the Catholic Church has installed an HVAC system, and they've changed the interior so that it suits them. But there are absolutely no, other than the fact that you can say the whole thing is a nave, there are no cathedral features here. So I have to end it at that. I know some of you have to go to the bathroom real bad. Virginia,
No, two doors that open at the cathedral, are they still there?
yes, they're still integrated in.
Tell them about those doors.
Well, the doors, doors or door is a massive door on one end of the thing, and it opens up, and the preacher can then talk to the people in their cars. But actually, the whole point of the doors was to get more ventilation in the cathedral. Is that what you wanted to hear?
Well, one of the things is that I was surprised when I was there, when there's two great big glass doors open and that fountain comes up, that's for the production. And the other thing was, I got distracted because there were birds inside, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
And balloons stuck up on the ceiling. All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry I took so long. I didn't get it all done.
Thank you.
So Pat asked me to close the meeting this morning, but I want to thank Bill. Bill, excellent job, man. I loved your presentation. So if you have questions or you want to know anything at all, please see Bill while he's here. I also wanted to thank Dee for the music this morning as we began. And as you get ready to go worship and celebrate, remember two things. As we talked about earlier, friendship is the key. The friendship in this group can't be beat anywhere around in town. So if you have not called someone last week, call them this week. And I got asked one quick question this morning. Why am I in shorts? Well, for those of you who do not know, I am originally from Hawaii and it is officially summer. And you will see me in shorts during the summer. So get used to it. And I hope you enjoy your week with your family. Have a great week and God bless.